Hi everyone, I'm Sally Eaves, CEO of Tomorrow's Tech Today, and we're live here for a special all around the future of cloud with a particular focus on modern connected apps. And to dive into all the details, it's great to join you again, Nick. It's Nick McQuire, who is Executive Director of Product Management, Strategic Incubations at Microsoft. Welcome, Nick. Lovely to speak to you again.
And you, Sally. Thank you very much for having me and us. Great to be here.
Oh, fantastic. And perhaps a great way to start off, just to introduce yourself to the audience a little bit more and what you do with your team, particularly around strategic incubations, such an exciting, dynamic area for innovation.
Yeah, it's by no means easy, but yes, it is an exciting area. Hi, everyone. I'm a director of product management in our strategic missions and technologies division within Microsoft. This is our new business acceleration, new growth acceleration arm. It includes a number of areas, primarily our telco space, quantum computing, and US federal capabilities. And I sit in a team that looks at a number of different areas within our strategic incubations area. Primarily, we focus on new products, which is aligned to our major categories of incubation. I primarily do a fair bit on the thought leadership side, which is all about going to customers on the engagement side, showcasing some of the work we're doing, and covering kind of our core narrative to drive customers more towards what we see as co-innovation motions with customers. So this is all about designing programs to help them get started and achieve value from these emerging technology areas, today. So a number of areas there, but that's the core focus.
I think you bring to the fore, the convergence that's happening at the moment, but I love your focus there on kind of co-creativity, that power of ecosystem. I think it's one of the biggest trends of our time. So I love that off the bat. And also kind of supporting this, the power of education, interviews like this, but also wider series to bring people more information to make the best of this opportunity. I think one great example of that would be the Future of Cloud series. I wonder if you could share a little bit more about that with the audience too, because great information there across all those subject areas.
We're in the process of launching a series of live webinars, which ultimately look at what we see as the major disruptive technologies, along with the kind of core incubation areas attached to some very innovative customer scenarios that we think are very directionally relevant in terms of shaping the future of our customers' organizations and, of course, shaping the future of our business and the cloud itself. It's a 5-part series, so it focuses on a number of different areas, from modern connected apps, which is, of course, we're going to talk about, but we look at other areas like quantum computing, Earth observation, et cetera. And as the series host, I get the privilege of talking to a number of experts out there like yourself and some of our key Microsoft experts to share the perspectives, some of our learnings, but ultimately to help customers overcome challenges and get started today around these areas, which is really the core focus of the conversation in the webinars. So yeah, please, we'll share the information on this series to the viewers in the notes, etc. So please join us.
Definitely. I definitely put a shout out for the space one on a personal note as well. I love that. Really, really interesting. But also, you mentioned there about different insights and obviously the cutting edge technology. I think the examples that are brought to the fore are superb, but also it's the network too that you're bringing together. And I think that can be really valuable for everyone to share it and gain from as well. So I love that. And you mentioned there, of course, of the focus today around kind of modern connected applications. So perhaps to kind of drill into that, obviously we have massively evolving digital landscape at the moment. So this understanding of the future of cloud, but also around technologies in networking, that convergence area, I think is absolutely key. So perhaps to drill into that a little bit more, how would you describe the state of cloud at the moment and kind of what the key challenges and opportunities are here, but also the areas of change?
Yeah, it is a massive topic, obviously. I think the real frame in terms of the impetus for us to engage in this conversation is the fact that, yes, we've seen a tremendous amount of change and digital transformation enabled by the cloud over the last 15 years plus of transformation. But what resonates with us is some of the work that companies like McKinsey have done, where they have estimated and forecasted that the real economic and business value from the cloud, the real impact there, we've not really seen that yet. The big impact is actually going to come, through towards the end of the decade. Over $3 trillion of economic value they're estimating is going to be captured by global 2,000 organizations that are primarily on the cloud. And part of what we're focusing on is, the real lion's share of that value coming from innovation. So these are new products, these are new categories of operation, these are new business models for organizations. And that is really where emerging technologies and really where the cloud is really going to kick in over the next number of years. And of course, this is one aspect of this is what we're going to talk about is in the context of networks and modern connected apps, but there's other dimensions to this as well. And really what we're seeing is that customers up until now have been primarily focused on the other piece of that value, and that's coming from optimization. So how do I drive agility and efficiency? How do I reduce cost? How do I minimize risk? All those aspects are critical in current trends around infrastructure modernization and cybersecurity, et cetera, data transformation, et cetera. And they are very key today. And that's really where a lot of customers are oriented. But we're starting to see now with generative AI, a shift around this new kind of innovation area. And that's really where the future of the cloud is driving a lot of the interest from the conversations we're seeing out there.
Absolutely. I think that innovation and shared value and the power of the narrative you're describing alongside that change, I think from an education piece, massively important too. So totally agree with Nick on that. I think that's absolutely key. But also this convergence, I mentioned it earlier on, didn't I? So many different things for organizations, frankly, of all sizes to be navigating at the moment. And again, you could kind of pick a mix of things to choose from here. But you mentioned a few, obviously, kind of sophistication and the severity, scale and scope of cybersecurity threats, but also different forms of convergence, like IT and OT environments, kind of the energy transition that's affecting everybody. We could go on, couldn't we, if you see what I mean? And on-device AI, going back to generative AI subjects, so much to deal with, and kind of where you see that go. I'd love to drill into that a little bit more about the most impactful area for the future of cloud, or is it more kind of that mix converging together?
Well, it really is a blend of those two aspects that you pointed out there, Sally. So for us, what we see is it really drills down into kind of two major innovation shifts that are shaping the direction over the next 3 to 5 years, and possibly even a little bit beyond that as well. And this doesn't necessarily encapsulate all that's going on, because obviously, to your point, there's a tremendous amount that customers have to deal with. But rather, it's a focus on what we at Microsoft see as critical in terms of some of our key investments, as well as some of the scenarios we're starting to see emerge from customers today that we think are going to be very important in terms of shaping that future. And those two areas really focus on what we call modern connected applications and what we call AI and quantum at scale. And so these two sources of innovation, think of it as kind of the future of networking and the cloud coming together in one stream. And then think of it as the future of computation, particularly heavy computation based problem solving capabilities coming into the second stream. And these are the two areas that are shaping how we think about the next generation of investments we're making at Microsoft. Modern connected apps are all very much about, how we're starting to see the cloud continuing to expand, and it's helping us get compute and networking in historically tough to reach areas, which is changing that paradigm for applications. And at the other end of the spectrum, this idea of future of computation, when we start to bring large scale AI en route into quantum computing in the future, what that will enable us from a speed and scale as well as precision basis in terms of heavy computational based problem solving. And that for us is really going to open up a lot of fields in the areas of scientific discovery. So these two areas are the core aspects. They're not necessarily the entirety of that innovation in the cloud coming over that 3 to 5 year and beyond period, but they certainly form the basis for what we're concentrating on from an incubation and investment point of view. And we really think that the goal here, coming back to, why this is important, is we really want to help our customers, think about and plan, but this is ultimately about them getting a foothold so they can have some of that early competitive advantage coming from these areas coming down the line.
That's super interesting. And again, just from the audience point of view as well, research out from Broadridge really drilled into some of what you were talking about there, Nick, and it's literally only out in the last few weeks, but looking about how organizations are investing, what's driving that adoption and what's kind of holding back as well. And the points you're talking about there, I think really linked into that opportunity and how to invest in the right way. I think love your points there around modern connected apps, in particular. The network aware aspect of that for me is right up there. If we've got this future that's increasingly, say, distributed, we've got latency driven, but above all, it's this network awareness, isn't it, that's absolutely coming to the fore, that can advance all these AI scenarios. I love the one you mentioned there about the sciences too, because I think you're absolutely spot on. So super exciting to me to see what you're doing to support that in a number of different ways as well. I think collaboration is a big part of that. Support of developers is a big part of that too. So I'd love to drill into both of those a bit more, if I may. So on that point of collaboration, let's go into that a little bit first, because it is, for me, one of the biggest opportunities, themes, and necessity, frankly, but we can do so much further, can't we, if we do it in that way? So could we explore some of the most important ecosystem partnerships for Microsoft right now, and how you're driving this forward?
Yeah, and so as you know, partnerships absolutely critical. I'm so glad you asked that question. I mean, clearly, you know, when we think about modern connected apps, as you rightly pointed out, these are these highly distributed, secure, resilient, but also network aware applications that we think are going to unlock new sources of AI-based innovation, not only for enterprises and governments, but also for telecommunications providers, you know, all over the world. And what we're seeing today is the changes in the networks, what we call modern networks, you know, spanning 5G networks, as well as all the way through into space and satellite networks. They're changing as well. And they're helping us, you know, put compute, as I said earlier, into tough to reach areas. But they're also having the ability to be programmable, which means that developers can start to program greater network intelligence into these applications and can solve for some of these newer scenarios. And I'm sure we'll cover these in just a second. So in order to enable this next generation and this new breed of application around modern connected apps, though, partnerships with telecommunications providers are absolutely key. So I'm really pleased you asked that question, because they're ultimately this critical piece in terms of how we think about the future of the cloud, right? Because their modern infrastructure from a network perspective really powers this next generation of applications. But, you know, operators themselves, they're on a journey when it comes to their digital transformations, of course. And so what we're oriented around is coming back to this topic of co-innovation, right? We want to be that trusted co-innovation partner to our telecoms partners all over the world, helping them with their own digital transformations, you know, more or less at every step, you know, through this process. And there's really kind of three areas that we're helping them in this journey. The first is about putting AI at the core of the network and really the core of their business. And we're starting to see a lot more activity there where operators are starting to use, you know, generative AI, but also just broadly, you know, machine learning at the heart of their networks to improve their customer experiences, to improve revenue streams, all critical. Once you've got AI at the core of the network, you have this ripple effect, though, what we're seeing, where they can then operators can then start to transform their processes, you know, ranging from network operations, but all the way in through to CRM and customer experience as well. And then lastly, that ultimately into business processes opens up new revenue streams. And that's really where AI is really playing a role as well. So we've been working with customers like BT and Tampnet, Deutsche Telekom, you know, to work with them through this journey of transformation with AI. And that is really where modern connected applications become a real unlocking source of revenue for the operators and our partners as well. So that partnership approach, those co-innovation motions with AI at the core, is really how we see you know, this new category of applications starting to emerge.
I love that. And you mentioned there about value from the operator perspective too. And Ericsson's mobility report came out recently, and that really puts that front and center about how much of a high up priority that is from an operator perspective. And again, the collaboration piece to deliver that value, I think, is right up there. And also, just as you were talking there, I was just thinking about open APIs. I think the work that you're doing there, bringing developers and operators together, I think, again, from a network aware perspective, I think is really, really, but it's a game changer for me in terms of making those experiences a reality. So yeah, I think great examples there that bring it to life. And maybe Halo Cars in Las Vegas could be an example of that kind of in the ground at the moment. And I think there's another one that you're doing in Canada with CloudHawk, I believe, as well, that really bring to the fore the power of bringing those aspects closer together, I think.
Absolutely, and the other piece is the developer ISV part of the equation as well, and bringing these two constituencies, both critical in terms of how we're going to enable this future of cloud functionality in the future as well. Ultimately, because this next generation of networks are inherently software based, right? They have the ability now for developers to leverage functionality in these networks to build and more effective experiences for highly distributed applications, because they can now communicate more effectively with the network through these APIs. And so you rightly point out, we're seeing operators, our partners all over the world, starting to expose these APIs so that developers can start to leverage them in new ways. Actually, a lot of this capability is based on a solution we launched in public preview this year at Mobile World Congress called Azure Programmable Connectivity. This is very much our platform, which transforms how developers interact with network APIs. And what we're seeing, obviously we're helping to abstract all that complexity, but we're seeing quite a significant progress with this solution from operators, tier 1 operators all over the world. And where it gets really, really interesting is where we start to see ISVs start to leverage this capability. So you mentioned Halo Car. Halo Car, is a great example. For those that are not familiar with the work we're doing there, Halo Car provides rental electric vehicles. They've been working on a remote piloting solution, which allows them to drop off their rental vehicles that are rented by their customers to their customers' premises without a pilot. What's interesting about this project is that it's confined to Las Vegas in Nevada. Very dense urban areas, lots of devices competing for network resources. And what they've been able to do using Azure Programmable Connectivity with our partners, T-Mobile, who control the wide area network in this case, they're able to actually have a lot more control over the quality of service of the network using these APIs to allow them to have the resilient and stable connectivity to deliver this type of autonomous vehicle solution. We've got a number of other examples where these network APIs are being utilized in other scenarios, but that one really stands out as one example that I think is really indicative of the way in which networks, from a network resiliency perspective, are going to help enable some of these more advanced AI scenarios in the future. It isn't necessarily all about autonomous. In this case, it's about autonomous vehicles, but what it really does point to is how that network piece is going to evolve, and that will open up a lot more for other AI-based scenarios in the future as well. So exciting stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, by doing this as well, there's so much value, isn't it, that's given. You mentioned there about ISVs, but also system integrators as well. If you have things that are made available, so network capabilities that are made available, whether that's the quality of service or the location or the identity verification, so many benefits there to give that more personalized, tailored experience to consumers. So it really is a game changer, I would say. And what you're doing there, I think, is, again, you mentioned complexity, you're kind of abstracting that in many ways, aren't you? And also, particularly from an architecture point of view, but making it common, that commonality across all infrastructures for the carriers. So bring that all together, amazing benefits. So I love that. I think the Halo one, I think we could all kind of visualize that from a Las Vegas perspective. So it brings it to life, doesn't it, in terms of the difference that can make too. So I love that. Nick, you also mentioned there about learnings, and we've talked a little bit about MWC, which again goes by so quickly, doesn't it? But the learnings just continue. And you mentioned a little bit there about some of the kind of key talking points and some of the news you brought out. But maybe I'd love to reflect for a few minutes on where we are now from that, when we think about some of the key trends, but also as people are trying out some of the new developments. What are you seeing in terms of reflections and learnings from that so far?
Yeah, Mobile World Congress, such a huge event. As you mentioned, it's amazing, actually. It feels like it was ages ago now, and it was only just a few months ago. Crazy how quickly things move. But looking back on it, this year for us was all about what we call telco transformation in this era of AI. AI was, everywhere at Mobile World Congress this year. And really what we focused on, though, was making it real for customers in a number of critical areas of the telco business. So, how you can leverage AI to elevate the customer experience, very, very key topic of conversation. How do you streamline operations and business processes using AI? How do you, of course, modernize the network and advance network capabilities using AI? And then lastly, how do you monetize? Always a huge topic with 5G, but also even beyond in the future as well. So we spent a lot of time navigating those 4 key areas with customers throughout the show. What was interesting, though, from a learnings perspective, was this year was actually the growth in the number of enterprises that were at the show this year. Like, I've been going to Mobile World Congress since it was in Cannes way back, too many years ago before. I mean, obviously showing my age in this respect. But I was astounded. I wasn't there this year, but I was astounded to hear how many how many enterprises are now attending the show. What we did at this year for the first time is we sponsored what was the inaugural Manufacturing Digital Transformation, or DX Summit. And that was really fascinating because we gained a tremendous amount of learning from our conversation, both with enterprises, but also specifically with manufacturers, and how AI, and particularly private 5G networks, are transforming the manufacturing business all up. So there's a couple of key things that kept coming up. For example, customers are very much wanting solutions and to their business problems. And Mobile World Congress historically has been very much about network technologies and not necessarily about focusing on the problems that businesses have. So that was one thing that kept coming up. The other thing that was interesting when we think about 5G, because obviously it is Mobile World Congress, so 5G is obviously going to be a huge topic of discussion. But it was really thought of as this enabler of AI, not a replacement of technologies like Wi-Fi or LoRa or Ethernet, which are very common technologies in the manufacturing operations side of organizations. So that was the other thing that was quite interesting to hear from customers. I think lastly, though, I think what was really important to hear from our perspective was that most of the customers were saying, look, this is a complex ecosystem. So we want the ecosystem to work together on this. We really feel that it requires an ecosystem approach. And that was for us really, really resonant because of the fact that we're very much in that space. This is, for us, it's very much an ecosystem challenge and opportunity. So our partnership approach, both with operators as well as with the systems integrators and ISV community that you rightly pointed out earlier, is really, really critical in this. So that was really what we learned, I think, as in terms of the top line, learnings from the show.
I love that. I think that point about ecosystem and collaboration, we've seen that growing, particularly over the last 3 years. And it's kind of at that peak point at the moment, isn't it? And it's fantastic to see them more focus on actualization, to totally agree about more kind of enterprise representation, and equally on the developer side too. I think the other key thing I wanted to say as maybe as a reflection too, support with education on areas around governance, for example, particularly that we're seeing with AI. And the education piece there, I think, is absolutely critical. So totally agree with that. But also just a shout out as well from a diversity and tech perspective too. Fantastic to see a broader focus on that. For example, in areas like neurodiversity that we saw at MWC as well. And obviously Microsoft have been very heavily involved in really supporting that in very tangible ways too. And obviously the event that you had at MWC as well was very much in that space, and visibility really matters, doesn't it? So lovely to see genuine work in that area that's really coming to a head too. Maybe my final kind of thought on that was consistency of quality from an experience perspective and a quality of service perspective too. Additionally, a bigger theme around that, and certainly a reflection point that a lot of people are talking to me about at the moment. So perhaps another kind of final nugget on this too. What are you seeing there in terms of support around this quality of service theme?
Yeah, there's kind of two elements to this that I'd like to highlight. I think the link between how network programmability and network transformation that we've been highlighting as being critical in the context of modern connected apps, how that quality of service actually impacts the customer experience. And one particular area that we announced at Mobile World Congress that I think is really another really interesting scenario for modern connected applications and network programmability that also connects very closely to the huge topic for operators in terms of how they monetize, is the work we're doing in the area of Azure, with Azure Programmable Connectivity, in the area of fraud detection. So we've been working with a number of banks in Brazil, for example, one particular bank, Banco Itaú, as well as with the network operators in Brazil, to better combat fraud. It's a massive issue in the country. Over 40% of Brazilians have been victims of fraud in the past. What this ecosystem approach is doing is coming together is we're basically collectively exposing functionality, network functionality in the networks through these APIs, a couple of APIs they're oriented around how you can better detect fraud on financial transactions going over cellular networks. So you can detect SIM swaps. You can look at a much closer area around location and device ID as well. Those data points are going into how these banks are being able to better indicate when fraud is taking place. So that was one prime example of where you're also leveraging that capability to improve the customer experience, which I thought was quite fascinating, and a real kind of, I think, a leap forward for the industry in terms of new monetization opportunities. The other piece is around just the pure resiliency of the network, enabling advanced AI scenarios. So we talked a little bit about autonomous vehicles. I think part of what is interesting in terms of what these types of applications like Halo Car and remote piloting are revealing is the fact that now some of our partners, like, for example, T-Mobile in the US, they're able to release what they call quality on demand APIs, which basically ensure this real-time feed of data coming from both 5G and LTE based networks is resilient to enable these advanced AI scenarios. And so when we think about the AI applications of the future, and we think about generative AI, many of them are going to require that resiliency of the network, which I think these types of applications now are really pointing in terms of that direction as well. So I think those are the two areas, the resiliency and the quality of service piece for these new types of AI applications, as well as how things like fraud detection can actually better prevent and fraud on one hand, but ultimately improve the customer loyalty and customer experience on the other. So that would be kind of how we see that playing out.
I love that. And on that resilience piece, I love every way you're describing that. It's all embedded by design, and the way you're growing that is with that focus. So that's massively important, I think. And your points there about fraud as well. There's something coming up in a few weeks' time on that very subject, Nick. You really spoke, I think, at the heart of the matter about how much of a challenge that is. And again, new research, I think LexisNexis is bringing out something very shortly too, that kind of drills on the massive need that is, and it literally is a worldwide one. So also democratizing support around that, massively important too. So brilliant, Nick, great examples. And I know we're really going to be out of time here, so I'm going to do kind of final kind of takeaway in terms of reflecting on so much here that we've talked about today. I think that quest for sharing information about this, giving people that quality information to make informed choices couldn't be more critical than it is today. So perhaps a final thought is back to the Future of Cloud series. Obviously, the episode coming up, Nick, can I give you a kind of final sentence or two just to kind of summarize what we'll be diving into on that show?
Yeah, awesome. We've only just scratched the surface here. I mean, it's been a superb conversation. Thank you so much for the insights as well, Sally, because we're learning through this as just as much as everyone else is in these new areas. But in the next episode, I highly encourage all the viewers to check it out. We're obviously taking a closer look, a little bit deeper dive around these communication technologies and how they're kind of shaping how we see the cloud of the future. And obviously, with all the hype around generative AI today, there is actually some important intersection and transitions happening at that point between networks and the cloud that we're wanting to delve a little bit deeper in. And obviously this is very important when we think about AI applications in the future. So I'm joined by Sean Hackle, who's our VP of 5G strategy. Super knowledgeable expert in these areas, and ultimately how we're going to discuss how modern connected apps are transitioning and revolutionizing some of the experiences for our customers and our telecommunications partners, because this is very much about how they can transform themselves. So highly recommend you check it out. Yeah, we look forward to seeing you there. And obviously, please do ask us questions, because we very much want to engage with everyone on this topic.
Love that, Nick. Thank you. And on that subject of questions too, that was going to be my final point too. On the episode so far, so engaging in terms of the interaction. I know
thanks.
things get really followed up on, so that feedback is, I thought I just wanted to share that, because it's really important, like active listening and responding to the audience and things. I've seen that happen in real time. So, and outside of that too. So definitely everybody watching, do get involved in that. And again, catch up on the series on demand as well, because there's something for everyone, for organizations of different sizes and across verticals too. So I know we're out of time, Nick, but thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you and catching up, and look forward to doing so in the future. With so much change, let's stay on top of that and keep coming together and continue those conversations and actions.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me, Sally. And yeah, I look forward to the next time as well. We'll have more to discuss, I'm sure, in the future. So look forward to chatting.
Thank you so much, Nick. A pleasure. And for everyone watching and listening too, thanks so much for joining us. And again, please follow up with more questions and feedback. We really do appreciate it. I've been Sally Eaves. Thanks so much for joining us.